Welcome to It Takes a Family, a podcast that helps take parenting from desperation to hope. I'm one of your hosts, Andy.
And I'm your co-host, Kelly. Once a week, we'll highlight experts and other parents like you who have been in the trenches of parenting, bringing hard lessons learned and insights on how to navigate even the most difficult of family circumstances.
All right, today we have a very fun episode. We're discussing a balance of nurture and structure and hearing a story from some good friends. We've got John and Cassie Adams with us today. Guys, welcome.
Thanks. Hi, thanks for having us.
So a little bit about the Adams. They're my friends, and
They're my friends too.
They're our friends.
Thank you.
And they're launching our foster care initiative right now here, but they've got a long history here at the ranch and in foster care and some different things. Graduates of the University of Georgia, teachers,
Go dogs.
Teachers by trade, and so we're really glad to have you guys.
Thank you.
All right, so here's where we like to start all of our episodes. We are the It Takes a Family podcast, so we like to kind of frame it within this family. So I want to hear relatively quickly, tell me about the family you grew up in and the one you lead now.
Sure. I grew up in a kind of a smaller family. My both parents in the home, both were working full time. My mom was a teacher, and dad worked in the agricultural industry. I'm the youngest of only two children. My sister is 2.5 years older than me, and it was a Christian home in a small town, close to my grandparents. So, kind of a quintessential country vibe.
Nice. I like that.
I also grew up in a very nuclear family. Both my parents, I have a brother and a sister. I'm the oldest. I'm very much an oldest. And I was born out of state. My dad was in the military, but we lived in Georgia for most of my life. And when I think about this podcast and the balance of nurture and structure, I think like my parents were kind of that balance. My dad was the structure. Or at least he was cast in that role, and my mom was cast in the nurture role. Though when I reflect, she provided a lot of structure, but that was the part that she played. Both my parents are one of four, grew up with lots of family and cousins. We're all very connected and still very connected with my parents and siblings. So,
Excellent. And the family you lead now, tell me a little bit about that.
So we have 3 kids. We live here at Eagle Ranch, but we have 3 kids, 2 that are at home with us and 1 that is out of the house now.
Excellent. All right, but I know enough about your story to know that that's not the only children you've cared for, right?
correct.
We tallied up your total number of children in preparation for this. So tell the people, how many children have you cared for in your home?
That would be 39 children.
That's
How long have y'all been married?
We have been married 15 years.
It'll be 15 years this December.
15 years.
John's the math teacher. So
Yeah,
he does the
teacher.
math
I
for
am
them.
not.
Yeah.
So yes, we've been married 15 years. Our first daughter was born right before our 5th anniversary, and that's when we started our parenting journey. So in 10 years, we've cared for 39 children in our home.
All right, so that's like a lot more than others, right? Some of those foster, some of those as house parents at Eagle Ranch. What's the motivation for stepping towards? Hey, we want to have lots, and it was not 39 at one time, but what was the most
like
ever
it.
in your home? Was it 9?
9.
9.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so that's like also a lot of children in your home. So
Yes.
what's the motivation for? Hey, we want to have lots of kids in our home, even kids that are not our own. And then why do you keep doing that?
Yeah, so it's almost hard to remember where we started and our motivation. I can pinpoint it, and I would say it has changed a lot. Our original motivation was to grow our family. And, we were looking for different ways to do that. That has changed. Our motivation really became what we understood as we came to really understand what was happening in our own home was the incarnation of Jesus. The idea that what it means to live like Jesus as a believer is to move towards people in hard places. That is what Christ did, coming from heaven, moving towards us in our sin and our humanity. And so to live like Jesus is to do that in some regard. So that's what became our motivation. But it's maybe not where we started. Sometimes I'm a little embarrassed of where we started in terms of that. But I think
What do you mean?
God uses all things. We started out in foster care to expand our family, which as a foster care advocate, I would say is not why you should engage in foster care. But I think God used that to really teach us what that could look like, whether that's adoption, foster care, house parenting, community service. There are lots of ways that living out the incarnation can look, but that became our motivation.
But do you find, because and my story is similar, that's also why we entered foster care, was to grow our family, and I've seen a shift like in our own hearts, and so I feel like God sort of used that.
For sure.
He uses that motivation for good ultimately, because all of our motivations are jacked up in some regard. So what, like, foster care is so simple and it's just always easy because you're doing what God's called you to. There's never any challenges to it, right?
No, it's the simplest thing ever.
Okay,
Like all parenting, super simple.
Yeah.
it's not simple, right? It's just challenging. It's fraught with all kinds of difficulty.
Yeah.
So why do you guys keep coming back? You guys are suckers. Like, what are you doing?
Well, outside of like what Cassie was saying, of like outside of being the incarnation of Christ and reaching out to these people, there's a little metaphor that I like to use when talking about foster care. And if you've ever read the Harry Potter movies or read the Harry Potter books or watched the movies or whatever, there's this
I
kind
have
of
not read the movies yet.
You haven't read the movies? Yeah, I hadn't either. Well, anyway,
But I did watch the books.
You did watch the books? That's great. But anyway, there's this moment like when Harry, learns that he's a wizard and he starts going into the wizarding world, that he begins to notice all of these magical things around him, and they're things that his Muggle family does not see. And foster care is kind of like that. Like once you're in it, and once you know, you can't go back to not knowing. Like once you see the need, you can't go back to not seeing it.
And that expands beyond foster care.
Oh,
once
absolutely.
you're aware that the world is more complex and messy than you maybe once knew.
Yeah, it's really frustrating because it would be really great if we could just kind of like pretend that none of that the world isn't complicated and that things are simple and we could go live a simple life, but that's not real.
Right.
And so that is a big reason that we continue to do that, is because we know that the need is there. In addition to that, we also since working with our counselor and since being house parents here, we have learned a lot of skills that we feel help us feel better equipped to re-enter the foster care space by piloting this initiative. Like if 3 years ago, if you had asked us to do that, actually I think you mentioned something about maybe doing something like this in the future.
I didn't include you guys, but keep going.
But sure. But our thought was, I really hope that they don't ask us to do that. And then here we are actually wanting to be the ones to do that, because we have learned so much since being here, that we feel that we can step into that role more confidently.
Yeah, so speaking of learning so much, I know one of the things we want to talk about today is this idea of nurture and structure, and how does that apply to how you parent now? And when did you all start with that concept or those tools of nurture and structure?
Sure. So we started 8 years ago with a family counselor. We had one child. So our story sounds very dramatic. 9 kids, 39 kids. You just need one child to know that you have no idea what you're doing.
Amen. Amen.
It's not only if you are doing dramatic things. And so we had one very strong-willed child. And so we sought out family counseling. And so we happened to get paired up with a counselor who used to work here at Eagle Ranch. And he began to teach us some of these ideas, that there is a balance. I am a type A rule follower. And until I hit teenage rebellion, it just never occurred. You just do what you're told. So having a child who didn't do that, I was very confused.
Right.
You just do what you're told.
She was 2 at the time.
She was 2. Yeah. So we're not talking about a teenager. We're talking about a 2-year-old. And so, I thought, well, you firm hand and they straighten up, and that just did not happen with her. And she's wonderful, and she will do great things because she is strong. But we started with a family counselor who began to say, hey, maybe there's a different way. Maybe there's a balance. Maybe you need to connect with her around who she is rather than trying to strong arm her into being something else, or to be you in this case. And so that's where we really began the journey of understanding nurture and structure. And then it has only expanded as we have parented more and more children who were more diverse ages, stages, experiences, contexts. And we've had to expand that knowledge and understanding of what that means. And as John alluded, I think our experience as house parents at Eagle Ranch is really where that has become very robust and full, because we had the amazing advantage of being surrounded not by one counselor that we see once a week or once a month, but a lifestyle of multiple people who understand this model of parenting, encouraging us daily, hourly, moment by moment. And so have really been able to develop that even further.
Awesome. And then how does that work with the 2 of y'all tag teaming this idea of nurture and structure? Is like one of you the structure and one of you is a nurturer, or does it bleed over?
Well, so without getting like too crazy deep into all of it, I need structure in order to be successful. Like I've got ADHD, I've got to have my routines, got to have my structure. But if, I can sometimes lean too heavily into the structure, but that is where I kind of thrive just in existing as a human. With our kids, though, I do make great efforts to try to lean more into that nurturing, into that connection aspect of it. But my tendency is to lean a little too heavily on structure, and part of that is probably based on how I was brought up. I had a pretty structured home.
We both tend towards structure. So where I described my parents as like my mom was more the nurture, my dad was more the structure. We both tend towards structure, so we have to find that balance within ourselves. More than maybe I know lots of couples, even other house parents, who wouldn't say like I'm one, I'm the other. We have to do it a little more within ourselves and more contextually. So one of the things I think about when I think about nurture and structure, we were working with our family counselor. We had 3 high school or teenage girls living in our home at the time, our daughter and then 2 other girls. And we had an app on our phones that alerted us to their grades. And that became a source of conflict in our home. I would get an alert. Child failed to turn in this assignment, failed this test. And, we
As
had...
an educator, that probably feels good, too.
It
Yeah,
did.
right, yeah.
There was a moment where one of our girls was failing the class that I taught, and that was really hard for me.
And the class that I taught.
And the class that you taught. It was a hard time.
It's great.
And so, we had a structure for that. We had set up, if don't turn in an assignment, there's this consequence. If you're failing a class, there's this consequence. We had this great structure in place. And so we were prepared to deal with this fact. And it became a large point of contention in our home. There was arguing, there was shaming on my part, lots of things I'm not proud of, where our family counselor finally stepped in and said, you, to me, not to us, to me, you need to take the app off your phone. And in this case, the structure needs to be John, not you. You just need to be the person who they come in and you don't know what happened with their grades today. And you just are saying, hey, how was your day? Be the nurture and let John be the one who handles the grades because you're losing your mind.
So how did you were you relieved at that or
Um,
not excited about
you
that?
know, our family counselor and I had a fun dynamic. I generally was offended by most of the things that he said.
Absolutely.
But I knew he was right. And so, and at this point, we had years-long relationship. I had a high level of trust with him. And I was like, okay, like, you think that's going to work? So we have to find the balance within ourselves of like, okay, I can't always be structured. Sometimes I got to be nurtured. And between us as a couple of sometimes being like, you know what, I need to step away from the structure. I'm not able to balance it within myself.
Yeah.
You know,
In a healthy way.
recognizing like I'm not doing this well, and lean more into like I'm going to be the nurture, you be the structure.
And then
on that.
is it true that that balance is it going to be different for each child in terms of how they
yes.
respond? So it's not like a one size fits all.
No,
yes.
not
Yeah.
every child and not every topic.
Right. I mean, and there are some things where it's like, with one of our children, it's like, let me go address whatever the thing is. And it's pretty much needs to be me to be the structure for that child. And then for a different kid, it just depends on what is going on. Like, they can receive the structure from both of us, but it really depends on what the topic is. And honestly, part of that, like the topic differential, is a little bit based on us and what triggers us.
Okay.
So
you
like,
got to know yourself before
right,
you can even.
like if you know that grades are going to be a thing, then you don't need to be in charge of grade monitoring. Like, just take that off the table for you. So.
One of the things we talk about at the ranch from time to time is training versus control. It kind of fits within this balance of nurture and structure. As I heard you talking about that, like the grades, it's a great example of something we can attempt to control as parents. And our job is to train. And so sometimes we have to like give up that, like, hey, I will, like power struggle and like let them feel it. And it's so hard.
Yeah.
Because like we know and they're important and you should get good grades and I'm a math teacher, right? Like, yeah, it's really challenging.
So what's the alternative? So what does that look like in real life?
Like very literally grades, like what?
Yeah, like that example. Like I've got to let go. I can't control. I need to train. So, what do you do differently?
I mean, in that moment, like, Cassie took the app off the phone. I was in charge of addressing the grades. We went back and rebalanced a little bit of what our like choice consequence structure was for that. Because I believe one of our daughters, I think that's how one of our daughters lost her phone, was due to that.
Those stories.
And
are
it was like, if you have a missing assignment, you lose your phone until the assignment is turned in. But then there's a balance of, when they turn it in, it may take a week before the teacher marks it as turned in or grades it or whatever, or if the teacher doesn't take late work and just gives the 0, so
Yeah.
there was a lot of control there with that. And so we adjusted what the consequence was to kind of more aptly fit the choice. But then it became me, like I took on the responsibility of handling that because I was annoyed, but I was able to not be like dysregulated when addressing those situations.
I'd say we've also leaned into, there's some endemic training in systems. I mean, the schools has a system for handling grades, missing assignments. There's a point at which they reach out to a parent. One of the things the counselor shared with us when he was advising me to take the app off my phone, he's like, your parents didn't know every assignment. They knew what showed up on your progress report. Maybe let's focus on that. And if they missed an assignment or failed a test but are holding a B, are we really concerned?
Yeah.
And so also releasing some of the training of, our children are in these different contexts. And until the adults in those contexts are pulling us in, how much is that being, an investigator or a helicopter parent or whatever terminology you're familiar with? Like, we're seeking after this negative information so we can train it at ASAP. But there is a sense to which we back up and we allow the training of the systems we're a part of. If the teacher hasn't contacted you, the babysitter hasn't said anything, the Sunday school teacher didn't call you, like maybe give it space, let those systems train.
Wow. So this really almost is more about you than the child.
Oh, it's all about it. It's all about
Just
you.
figuring that out here. Yeah.
All about us.
It's all about you.
Okay. All right. I have kind of a hard question, and that is, y'all are doing this as a couple, but there are so many parents out there that are single parents. Like, what do you say to them? I mean, you all have each other to bounce off of, and my heart really goes out. Like, that's hard as a single parent. Can you still use these tools as a single parent?
I mean, I would say yes. We've worked with single parents,
single parent?
and I would say it is probably more challenging.
Yeah.
I can't speak to it personally,
Yeah.
but I would imagine that it is more challenging where you don't have the person in your home, the other adult in your home to help you balance. But that's where I would encourage everybody, regardless of who you are, to seek counseling.
Yes.
Like, everybody needs a therapist. Like, just period, enter the end on that. But seek counseling. Find your community. Like, find a safe person with whom you can share these things, and can give you sound advice.
Yeah, we've worked with a lot of single parents, and definitely having other people. I know one mom we worked with, it was her sister who, she'd be like, I'm losing it and I need you. I would also say, and I've never been a single parent, there are moments where that sounds a little easier. There is a challenge to cope. Like, there is a great thing where we can balance each other, but then you also have to get on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard too. So I think it's all really hard.
Yeah,
It's
regardless
all
of the
really
setup.
hard. But I do think, you need community in all forms of parenting. And, if it's not, sometimes it's, we've had friends who are married but alone in the moment, and they're calling and saying, I need a balance here. So I think whether you have a spouse or not, or a co-parent in the home or not, you've got to have somebody outside of that to help bring your balance.
We've laughed, Emily and I. She tells this story recently. She went on a little trip, and I had a tough morning, and I called her and I said, we're at a whole new level. And she laughed after the fact. She was like, I laughed so hard all day at we're at a whole new level. I'm like, I'm glad you found the humor in it. I was at a whole new level. But just like that, I all of a sudden was just out of control. And that feeling for a single parent of, I did have somebody to reach out and call, right? I called Emily, and she talked me off the ledge a little bit. It's a huge benefit, and it was helpful in that moment. I think the Lord really blessed me and Emily, because man, I was not good.
But I think also remember that day, and I think Emily said, call John and Cassie next
she
door.
did. Yes.
You need it. You need other people. It does have to be, even if you have a spouse, there does have to be call the neighbor, call the family member, call someone else to step in, if needed.
So, what would be the top 3 things that you would say to someone who's listening that's thinking, okay, what I'm doing is not working. What they're talking about sounds a little scary, but it is working. What are those steps that they can take? What are some things they can do today to start on that journey of maybe parenting a little differently?
Well, I would say a first step, not to push the Eagle Ranch brand too much, but a first step would be to reach out to Eagle Ranch's First Steps counseling department, just to talk to a professionally distant person who can give you kind of a top-down view, maybe you can describe the situation, or if you already have if you already have a counselor, absolutely use your resources that you have. I think getting an objective point of view can be a really great first way to start, because there could be a problem that either with you or with the relationship or with the kid that you just can't see because you're too close to it.
Right.
But
I think beginning with a self-assessment, Are you leaning towards structure or nurture? I think a lot of the parents we've worked with, because we work with parents, whether that's through foster care or house parenting, we're really partnering with the parent to address whether it's someone who's lost their child to foster care, addressing issues that have led to that, or working with a house parent as a house parent with a family that's admittedly saying there's something we need help. That's what they're asking for. Is assessing where you are. We've worked with a lot of parents who are overly structured like us and saying, okay, let's just name that. Let's say, okay, maybe I'm too tough. Or am I way too nurturing and there's no structure here and I'm just a fun parent. And I think we've seen a lot of that in single parent scenarios, especially, or divorced homes where you've got a separation. But even in a traditional family, just assessing where you are. So that's the first step to figuring out where you need to go. So if there's a lack of structure, let's start creating some. Or if there's way too much, where can I release and not totally lose my mind? It's my first step.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not grades. Maybe it is. Maybe it's the clean room. Maybe whatever it is. What can you begin to release?
Yeah, that's good.
That's great. Guys, it's been really fun and really wonderful, and we're so thankful for you guys, both as friends, but then also just your journey and the wisdom you have to share with folks has been really, really wonderful. So thank you so much for being on, and excited about what the Lord's doing in the next steps in the foster care initiative here. So good stuff.
Thank you. Hey, and I just want to thank everyone who tuned in today. We hope that this episode was encouraging to you and gave you some insights that you can use.
All right, we want you to tune in next week for stories from parents like you to hear the hard-learned lessons and insights they wish they knew going through parenting as well. Let us know if you enjoyed the episode by leaving a review on Apple or Spotify. Helps other parents find the show and tell other parents about it too. We'd love for you to connect on Facebook and Instagram. Let us know topics that you're interested in. Thanks again for listening. Have a wonderful week. Go forth and do great things.